Hey, it's Chris and welcome back to The Ridge. Today we're going to discuss our 10 gardening secrets for a huge harvest this season. Last year we had an absolute bonanza of a harvest, despite having literally zero gardening experience. Heck, I've never grown anything except for big tomato leaves. I've always wondered why I've never gotten any tomatoes. But this year, we ended up growing 6 varieties of tomatoes, including brandywines, and we grew cucumbers, strawberries, blueberries, and many others. Our harvest far exceeded our expectations. We even got several brandywines that weighed close to 2 pounds each. So we want to share with you what we learned and what we consider to be our 10 secrets to gardening success. And we'll throw in a few things we learned along the way. Employ these 10 tips, and we're sure you'll have a banner harvest, just like we did. Join us.
Sweet Maple Ridge Farms. Come on down, everybody. Go!
All right, so let's get started. Number 1, use raised beds whenever possible. We built these raised beds last year before the season started. We filled them with compost, wood, and dirt from the woods. This year we added some screen topsoil. We're going to finish that off with some cow manure and straw, and there's Mrs. Sweet Maple Ridge. You can see how happy she is about that cow manure. And so we'll top that off with cow manure and straw, then we'll till it all in. The worms really love it. We like the raised beds because we feel it's easier to improve soil quality. Without raised beds, you're sort of stuck with the soil you have. Sure, you can supplement it, but it is what it is at the end of the day, and it can take years to improve it. This is why we love our raised beds. Easy to get great soil pretty much instantly. All right, number 2, use plant supports. We bought plant support clips from Amazon. They're $15.99 for 300 of them. And we use them in conjunction with tomato hooks with string, which we also bought on Amazon. You get 60 of them for $21.99. They're strong and they work perfectly to support our tomatoes. Last year, we used wire to support the tomatoes. We attached the string to the tomatoes using the clips, and we hooked the hooks to the wire strung across the top of the plants. Don't do this. The plants get too big, and believe it or not, the wire is not strong enough to support the weight of the plants. This is how big they get using these methods. This year, we're going to use rebar or some sort of angle iron to support the plants. More on that later. But don't use wire. We had a thunderstorm with strong winds come through last year, and the wire broke and all our tomatoes fell. Luckily, we saved them, but it wasn't good. Don't underestimate how heavy these plants will get. This is how much wire we used last year to support our tomatoes. You can see 2 or 3 strands of them together, and I can tell you it snapped. Number 3, use the right fertilizer at the right time. Use all-purpose plant food like regular Miracle-Gro upon planting. That has an NPK of 24,816. The amount of NPK each fertilizer has is listed on the package. It stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and each has an effect on plant growth. If you know what each effect has and what each chemical does to the plant, you can essentially tell the plant what you want it to do. Let me explain. Nitrogen is used by plants to create leaf growth and good green color. If you give a plant fertilizer that has a high amount of nitrogen, the plant will concentrate its energy into making lots of nice, big green leaves. Phosphorus, the P part of the NPK, is used by plants to help form new roots, fight disease, make seeds, fruit, and flowers. So, if you want a plant to make strong roots and make lots of blooms, which will in turn create fruit, give the plant a fertilizer high in phosphorus, and that, again, is the second number in the NPK. In a few days, you'll see the plant bloom like crazy, and this means a lot of fruit. Potassium, or the third number in the NPK, is used by plants to make strong stems and increase their overall growth rate. If you want a plant to have strong stems and support all the fruit you're going to get, and you also want it to grow quickly, use a fertilizer with a high potassium content. Again, that's the K part of the NPK. Ashes from your wood stove are also high in potassium. All right, so number 4 is deploy the triple threat, but it's actually the quadruple threat. So for fertilizing, I'm just going to show you what we do. And we found that it works really well. Of course, we had a Brandywine last year that weighed almost 2 pounds. We actually had a couple of them, so it was amazing. We found that this works really well. So first thing you want to do, obviously, is harden off your seedlings. When you plant them, this is what you want to do. So we use raised beds, as we said. So in your raised beds, you want to dig a deep hole enough to bury the tomato plant down to its first leaf node. Then in the hole, you want a tablespoon of bone meal. Add that to the bottom of the hole. And then you want a tablespoon of organic fertilizer. Now this says fruit tree fertilizer. I'm out of the regular fertilizer that we would use, but this is essentially the same thing. It's a 5-2-2. So you want to take a tablespoon of this and a tablespoon of bone meal and put that in the bottom of the hole and stir it around just a little bit. Note that these fertilizers, they're not immediately bioavailable, so they need to be broken down by soil and worms. They take a few weeks to start working. You can see this, a little hole from something that got in there. Animals and rodents love this stuff, so just know that. But anyway, they need to be broken down by soil and worms and stuff. They take a few weeks to start working. Next, what you want to do is coat your root ball of your little seedling with a tablespoon about of bone meal. This is going to encourage root growth. This combination is kryptonite for plants. Now, I'm told that kryptonite isn't actually a good thing, but in this reference, I mean it's a great thing. It causes your plants to grow like crazy. So, once you have your little seedlings planted, you want to cover them in the soil. And then what you want to do is just take your organic fertilizer, a tablespoon, and another tablespoon of bone meal. Take it and sprinkle it around the plant, and then just rub that into the soil. Then for the final step, and this is what we think is the most important step, is to get a watering can. And for your first watering and your first feeding of seedlings, you want to do like a half strength of this. But you want to take some regular Miracle-Gro because it's just a good all-around plant food that encourages just green leafy growth. You want to take Miracle-Gro and you want to mix it with this, the fish emulsion. And this stuff is great. So in a watering can, mix this. For your first watering, you want to do half strength of this and half strength of this. And then water your seedlings in. For the next couple feedings, and you're going to do this once every 2 weeks. And we did it every other Saturday. So once every 2 weeks, you're going to feed with this. And you are also going to replace your bone meal and your organic fertilizer at the base of each plant. So every 2 weeks, a dose of this, a tablespoon of each at the base of the plant, rub that in, and then a feeding of this. Once you start seeing blooms, especially like on your tomatoes and your cucumbers and stuff like that, you want to replace this with something that is going to encourage lots and lots of blooms, which means lots and lots of fruit, by using Jack's Bloom Booster or Blossom Booster. This stuff is amazing. So instead of using the Miracle-Gro, you want to replace it with this. So you're going to use these two, in addition to your bone meal and your organic fertilizer. And you're going to do this twice. So every other week, do that twice. So you're going to use this for a 4-week period. You're going to see tons of blooms, and you're going to see your plants just start exploding with fruit. Once you feed this twice, you're going to replace that with a good Jack's 20-20-20 all-purpose. So this and this together, feed that in along with your organic fertilizer and your bone meal. Same way, 1 tablespoon of each at the base of the plant and a watering can of this. And you do this, and it's going to be, you are going to have absolutely incredible results. We finished off the season with Jack's All-Purpose 20-20-20. It has that high number in each category with the fish emulsion and the bone meal. the organic fertilizer. And if you do this, you are going to have an amazing harvest and even better yields. You are just going to be so surprised at how well this works. Number 5, use an automatic waterer. This is so important, especially for those who grow tomatoes. Even dose watering on a daily basis with straw, leaves, pine needles, or other soil covering is really essential so that the plants don't dry out. Why? Well, it's especially important for tomatoes, but plants need an evenly moist soil. You can't let them dry out, especially with the tomatoes, as I said, as the tomato itself will shrink as the soil dries. So when you water it, the roots suck up all the water, sending it straight to the tomatoes. This sounds great, right? But actually it's not. That's because your fruit, because the tomato shrunk, the tomato itself can't handle all the water and they burst. So now you're done. But this is what we do. We used old hoses to set up a watering system. We drilled small holes in the hose for water to squirt from. We hooked the hose to an automatic waterer, which watered every evening for between 1 to 3 minutes, depending on the time of the year. As it got hotter, we upped that to twice a day. So that way, the soil stays evenly moist. It never dries out. And especially if you use a covering like straw or pine needles, it helps to keep the soil moist throughout the day. Plus, it helps to prevent the leaves from getting wet, and it helps to prevent water from splashing up one of the lower leaves, which is like the number one way that plants get disease, especially finicky ones like brandywines. Don't ever let the water touch the leaves or let the leaves touch the soil. That's why I want to cover it in straw, so that way it doesn't happen. A pro tip is to get an automatic waterer for 3 or 4 zones. We had our entire garden on one zone last year for about the first part, and we found that there wasn't enough pressure to push the water to the entire garden through all these hoses. So we divided the garden into sections, again using old hoses, and each section being a different zone on the waterer. So we have one zone, or the first zone, run on a few minutes, then we turn that off, then zone 2 turns on, then zone 3 turns on, and then zone 4. This way, the entire area of your garden gets watered. And just showing you these hoses, this is how we have them set up. There's obviously small holes, and at the end, we just have it kinked off with some zip ties. Super easy and really cheap. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. We really appreciate it. Number 6, make sure you keep animals out using our foolproof method. So this is what we saw in our garden last year, and it completely devastated it. Pulled out onions and tomatoes and everything else. So we needed a solution. How'd we do this? We talked to Mrs. Sweet Maple Ridge family, who are lifelong dairy farmers, and they had a foolproof method to keeping rodents out of the garden. What was it? It was an AM/FM radio, and they said to keep it on all the time out there. So that's exactly what we did, and we found it worked really well. It keeps everything out, including raccoons. So here you go. This is what we did. You can see here we just used an old tackle box, and I strapped an old AM/FM radio in there that we bought off Amazon. Believe it or not, they're very hard to find, but we did find one on Amazon. And we deployed it, and we had a absolute success using it. So right now, we just have it play 94.5 3WS 24/7. We love that station. Turns out the animals hate it, but no more raccoon problems. And we highly suggest you do that. We would never have a garden without having a radio out there. Number 7, get some garden chairs and a small table, maybe even a shelter like what we did. So this might sound weird. Why have garden chairs? How does that help my garden? But if you have garden chairs and a small table and a little shelter out there, you'll go out there more often. You'll sit, you'll relax in the evenings. Hey, we even bring our favorite beverage out there, some chips and salsa, and just sit and relax while we listen to our favorite radio station because, tip number 6. We are convinced that the plants like it. Plus, you get to see what's going on in the garden. You get to see insect-wise what's happening. and you get to keep in tune with exactly what needs done, whether it's just a light pruning or fertilization, or maybe they need some water or something else. It's super relaxing after a hard day of work. We highly recommend it. All right, tip number 8, use straw, pine needles, and or cardboard. Never ever throw away Amazon boxes. We use them in our garden for soil covering, everything else. Plus, you can see here that we use pine needles and we use straw and everything else. It helps to keep everything really evenly watered, and that's super essential when you're dealing with finicky plants, especially like tomatoes. When you're using cardboard, make sure you don't use cardboard like this or like from 30 packs or anything like that. But you can see this is my favorite kind of beer. What's your all's favorite kind of beer? Put it down in the comments and let me know if you ever tried Old German, and if so, what do you think? But anyway, don't use cardboard that contains wax or color printing on it. One thing that I said before, don't throw away Amazon boxes, and we use them. Check out this video of all these worms underneath these Amazon boxes that have just been biodegrading in our garden over the winter. They look amazing, they help the soil, and they help to make your soil even better. So never throw away any Amazon boxes. All you need to do is put a couple rocks on top of them to keep them from blowing away. And of course, there are tons of benefits with using them. It keeps the weeds from growing, so you don't have to pull them at the start of the next season like we did this season for some of our beds that we didn't cover. Number 2, the worms love it. And number 3, it keeps all that cardboard out of the landfill. They'll break down in your garden naturally. All right, number 9, be aware of pH. So we're not getting into this too much. We're not any experts of this, and we don't really care too much about it. However, certain plants do need a low pH to thrive and make fruit. So you can use this soil acidifier and this soil tester that we bought off of Amazon. You see this blueberry here. It needs to have acidic soil. It's not going to grow without it. So for $22, we got that soil tester. It's super easy to use. It's well worth it, and it takes the guesswork out of everything and gives your plants the pH level it needs. And also, as a tip, use pine needles instead of wheat straw in your blueberries, because the pine helps to keep the pH low, and it does a great job of keeping the weeds out too. All right, number 10, get a vibrating toothbrush. So this is a weird one, we know, but it works really well. Let me explain. So most fruits and vegetables produce a bloom, which if pollinated, it produces a fruit or vegetable. But if the bloom doesn't get pollinated, it simply dies and falls off. So I can't speak for other fruits or vegetables, but for tomatoes, they have a blossom, and inside their blossom, it has both the male and the female parts, and it relies on the wind to blow the blossom around so that the male part gets sprinkled onto the female part, and that makes a tomato. Well, what happens if you live in a non-windy area, or your garden is behind your house, or it's sheltered with no wind access to it? Then your blossoms are probably not going to blow in the wind, and you're not going to have very good luck with pollination. So this is what we do. We use a vibrating toothbrush, and we put the toothbrush on each blossom to vibrate it, and you will actually see the magic happening in there, where you will see the pollen getting mixed together. Sometimes there's even like a puff of pollen that will come out, and you can rest assured that like 90% of the time that blossom is going to be pollinated. So no more having tons and tons of blossoms and then they just don't get pollinated, and that's that. That would be terrible. You can do everything right and still not get tomatoes. So this is what we do, and for every blossom that shows up, we use a vibrating toothbrush on it to ensure that it is pollinated. And that's why we have gigantic clusters of tomatoes on these tomato plants. It ends up working great. So what's your favorite gardening tip? Is there something we missed? If so, put it down in the comments to let us know. So that's it. That's the video. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up to let us know you approve. Definitely hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time out on the ridge.